Well, hello and welcome to another installment in our training library series. And this one is about how to effectively warm up. So, if you're joining me today, welcome, and let's get stuck in. So, who am I? If you're coming from, say, YouTube or Instagram, or it's the first time that you are seeing or hearing me talk, my name is Aaron, and I have ran AgroFitness now for just under a decade. And within that time, I have been a physical therapist, personal trainer, and an educator for the industry as well. And now I specialize in the coaching elements of helping people that have been traditionally let down by the fitness industry and those with injury complications or have health or medical conditions, whether they are chronic or new, and helping them get into fitness so they can still lose fat, build muscle, build confidence, and basically reach their goals. But there do tend to be a little bit of extra complications in those cases, and that's why I like taking them on. I like the complex stuff. But that's enough about me. Let's get into why you are here. So, naturally, we're talking about how to effectively warm up. So, by the end of this, I want you to know how you can understand how to structure your pre exercise prep effectively, learn the difference in the stretching types, and just uncover some simple mistakes that most people make so you don't make them yourself. So, first thing first is I don't like to call this a warm up. Although I've said how to warm up effectively, I just think that term is not quite right for realistically what we're working with here. So, I much prefer the term movement prep because it better encompasses what we are trying to achieve with this, which is preparing ourselves for the training session that we are about to do. Warm up simply implies too much about temperature, and I lost track when I was doing one to one coaching about the amount of times that people would just walk in and be like, oh, I've walked here, so I am warm. It's kind of not the point. But when it comes to movement prep, the most important thing that we can do is make it dynamic. A lot of time you'll see people just holding stretches in place before they train. Now, that has a few little issues that can arise from this, but we'll get into that a little later. The most important thing that you can do in your pre-exercise movement prep is to make it dynamic. And what that means is simply moving, mimicking the movements that you are about to do, gradually increasing muscular and joint range of motion through movement, through mimicry. Now, that could look like stretching, dynamic stretching, or it could be warm up sets. It could be doing lighter weights than what you would normally do before you then move into your actual working sets. But as long as there is an element of movement into it, because what that does for us is not only increase the heart rate and increase the blood flow to those areas we're about to work, it prepares the brain to understand that we are about to go and do some movement. It gets all of those movers, those proprioceptors, mechanoreceptors, fancy words I know, basically everything that gets us moving, it gets them primed to then go and train. When we're training, of course, we're trying to push our bodies past where it considers itself capable so that we can adapt and move forward. So make it dynamic. Loads of different ways we can do this. And part of this is kind of if you have questions or you want to know some specific bits, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to kind of talk to you about these kind of things. But if there's one thing you shouldn't do when it comes to warm up, is static stretching, movement prep, static stretching. No, 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 no. Now, I mentioned earlier it can cause problems. So, static stretching is basically the types of stretches that you do when you just hold them. Hold that stretch. You wait for that kind of tension to ease off. Now, these are brilliant for increasing flexibility and the ability of the muscle fibers to lengthen. However, pre exercise, what this can actually do is interrupt something that we have in our systems called Ingrams, which are essentially stored motor patterns. If I told most people do a body weight squat for me or sit into a chair and stand up, you don't really have to think about how your body functions into doing that movement. It knows the sequence of muscles to fire, it knows the sequence of joints to move. And static stretching pre training can interrupt these stored motor patterns. So then, if you were to go and say, do a barbell squat, your body actually has to spend a little bit of time relearning that movement pattern because it's been interrupted from its normal status quo. And this can lead to an increase in injury. Same for the other reason of why we would do static stretching, is it increases flexibility in the muscle. For the same reason that we said earlier about dynamic stretching, about priming the brain to understand that that muscle has now had a physical change and it needs to then work with it, static stretching can interrupt that process as well. Your brain is still stuck in what the status of your muscles 5 minutes ago. So when you go and train, the the kind of balance between the force that your body will exert on the joint through the muscle tissue and the actual capability of the tissue itself don't match up. And that can lead to things such as strains and pulled muscles, joint issues, and overall, not a particularly fun experience. However, I will say this, there is a time and a place when we might wish to do static stretching pre-exercise, and that is specifically when we are wanting to actually switch off some motor patterns. Now that comes into areas where it's a little bit more complicated, but these are things when you might need to switch off an overactive muscle. A lot of the time, people tend to have quite overactive quadriceps and hip flexors compared to hamstrings. Their back muscles might be quite tight when we want to be working on some core, which can be affecting how the interaction between left and right, front and back works in the body. So we can sometimes use static stretching to our advantage to kind of switch those patterns off to make what we want to work on that a little bit more effective. But that is entirely contextual to an individual and isn't something that I would say the general populace really needs to do. Myths and facts then. These are always interesting because these are conversations I tend to have weekly with most people. So, you must stretch before every training session. That depends on context and what you need to do to prepare yourself to move. If warm up sets for you, where you can gently take yourself into a wider range of movement through training and through a lighter set, works and that is safe and that will prime you for your training, brilliant. You don't necessarily need to do the dynamic stretching. But for other people, say older populace, those with a little bit more motor control issues, we've got some joint pain, things like that, we want to be doing a bit of dynamic stretching first because it gets the heart rate up, gets them primed, gets them mentally in the groove as well. So you don't necessarily have to stretch before every training session, but doing some movement prep in whatever degree that then sets you up is important and is something that you should be doing. So myth number 2 is the fact that you should stretch muscles because they are tight. Again, yes and no. A tightness feeling can be the fact that a muscle fiber is shortened, or it can actually be a result from it being pulled away. If we've got muscle imbalances, if we've got postural problems, it can actually be putting a strain on those muscle fibers that to you feels like tightness. So if you start stretching that, then what's going to happen is you're just going to make that muscle imbalance even worse because you're allowing it to be pulled into a worse posture even easier. Again, that is very, very contextual when it comes to kind of why we might need to stretch muscles and why these feelings of tightness are coming in. So again, ask me these kind of questions, fire them away. Like if you want a quick posture check, I can help you with that kind of stuff. And the final one is stretching and mobility are the same. They're not. The definition of flexibility is a muscle or a joint's ability to lengthen along the axis of its fibers, whereas mobility is the body's ability to be strong about a full range of motion of a joint. Now, kind of cutting through the jargon a little bit, flexibility is how much muscle can lengthen, mobility is how well it's in relation to a joint can move. Now, flexibility is a part of mobility, but they are not one and the same. Mobility involves a lot more. It's about strengthening your joints, your muscles in every available kind of range of motion that you have. So then it gets stronger. It can be stronger in deeper range. See a lot of people doing like half reps on bench presses and stuff like that, and that's going to decrease your mobility because you're not training yourself to a maximal range of motion of muscle tissue. So you end up kind of, if you went past that midpoint, you're not going to get as strong with it because you haven't trained to that degree. So flexibility as well, and even I've injured myself, I pulled a muscle. we don't really want to be stretching into those kind of things. We want to have a nice hearty balance of both. I can get into the science of injury and stretching and that kind of thing. We'll do that in a different presentation. But the ARC7 method. This is my bespoke coaching system. This is something that I've developed over the last 10 years to basically just be how we run our programs for our clients. And mobility and flexibility is a real key component to all of this, and something that is often very overlooked alongside things like motor skills, social fitness, and emotional fitness. But I want to make sure that every client that comes through my door gets all of this. Because if we go back to some of the reasons why people might be hurting themselves in warm-ups by doing static stretching, again, common mistake I tend to see, we want to make sure that that just doesn't happen. We're setting them up for success right from the start. And how has it helped others? Well, these are just some excerpts from check-ins that clients give to me based upon how our coaching experience is running. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but as you can see, like, we cut a lot of pain out. We're setting people up for success, and that includes making sure that their movement prep is accurate and suitable for them. So your next steps are just to remember that pre-exercise, we want these things to be dynamic, mimicking the movements that you are about to go and do in your training, and gradually opening the body up and allowing yourself and allowing your brain and body to start talking to one another. When it comes to static or flexibility developmental stretches, we want to do them post-exercise. They're the ones you're going to hold. They're the ones where you're going to start increasing the amount of flexibility in the muscles themselves. And of course, let's chat. There's a few points where you might have some questions, and the easiest thing to do is just simply reach out to me. Ask me these questions, drop me a DM, drop me a message, email, Instagram, all of this kind of lovely stuff, and I'm more than happy to help you through this and answer any questions that you might have to help you get better at doing warm-ups properly. Once again, thanks for joining. I'm Aaron, and I look forward to hearing from you.